Se Sava Vedera. That is the essence of all Vedic literature. Abhideya Nama. The process called Abhideya, or devotional activities. Sadhana Bhakti, another name of this process. Devotional service in practice. Hoiti, from this. Hoya, there is. Primera, of love of Godhead. Udgama, awakening. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. By practicing this regulated devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master, certainly one awakens his dormant love of Godhead. This process is called Abhideya. Please repeat. By practicing this regulated devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master, certainly one awakens his dormant love of Godhead. This process is called Abhideya. Purport. By the practice of devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting, the impure heart of a conditioned soul is purified, and thus he can understand his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That eternal relationship is described by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivara Swarubhoy Krishnera Nityadas. The living entity is an eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one is convinced about this relationship, which is called Sambandha, he then acts accordingly. That is called Abhideya. The next step is Prayojana Siddhi, or fulfillment of the ultimate goal of one's life. If one can understand his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and act accordingly, automatically his mission in life is fulfilled. The Mayavadi philosophers miss even the first stage in self-realization because they have no conception of God's being personal. He is the master of all, and he is the only person who can accept the service of all living entities. But since this knowledge is lacking in Mayavad philosophy, Mayavadis do not have knowledge even of their relationship with God. They wrongly think that everyone is God or that everyone is equal to God. Therefore, since the real position of the living entity is not clear to them, how can they advance further? Although they are very puffed up at being liberated, Mayavadi philosophers very shortly fall down again to material activities due to their neglecting the lotus feet of the Lord. That is called Padantyada. Aruya Kritishrena Param Padam Tataha Padantyadado Nadrita Yusmad Angraha. That's Srimad Bhagavatam 10:2-32. It is the statement of Prahlad Maharaj that persons who think themselves liberated but do not execute devotional service, not knowing their relationship with the Lord, are certainly misled. One must know his relationship with the Lord and act accordingly. Then the fulfillment of his life's mission will be possible. Amagyana-timirandasya ginanjana shalakaya chakshu unmanitam jena tasmai sri guruve namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master has very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torch light of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. We have a definition of any bona fide philosophical process must have certain essential items or aspects. First of all, there must be a definition of reality. For us, that is Lord Sri Krishna. And there should also be a method or a process for realizing that reality, and for us that is known as Bhakti Yoga. And there must always be a goal or a final experience of that reality. And as is being discussed in this verse and purport, that is known as prema, or love of God. So this is Gaudiya Vaishnavism in a nutshell. But any bona fide path of Vaishnavism, you will find, and all the great Vaishnava literatures, they have these three essential developments along the spiritual path: Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. And as Prabhupada has so beautifully explained here, he gives different definitions to this word Sambandha in many different parts of his books. And the one he uses here, when one is convinced about this relationship, which is called Sambandha, he then acts accordingly. So in other places, Srila Prabhupada uses the word connection, or to reconnect. We have been disconnected from Krishna. We don't know for how long, but then by some good fortune, Brahmanda Brahmite Kanya Bhagavana Jeev Guru Krishna Prasad Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. The jivas are travelling up and down throughout the Brahmanda, or the different universes, sometimes in the heavenly planets, sometimes in this middle planetary system, sometimes in the subterranean planets, enjoying a mixture of happiness and distress. But then by some inconceivable good fortune, we come in contact with Krishna's devotees, and they can be bothered. They have taken the trouble to enlighten us that we actually have a wonderful relationship with Krishna, and then we make that connection, we reconnect. We take up the process of bhakti. And Prabhupada uses many delightful analogies in different places throughout his lectures and books. Just like two business people may have initial business meeting, it goes well, so then they decide at some future point in time there will be an exchange of money. One will pay the other some money, and in exchange they will receive some goods or services. And the result of that is that both of them make a profit, so they're both happy. Similarly, another example is of a young man and a young woman desiring to marry. So, of course, we know in ancient times parents would arrange the marriages of their children, and that still goes on in some places. But the alternative is there, that young people will take matters into their own hands and meet one another, and if the initial meetings go well and they decide, yes, I want to spend my life with this person, so at some point there is an engagement, and then finally a wedding, and the result of that partnership, that union, then at some point in time there may be beautiful children come into the household. So in Gaudiya Vaishnavism we have this wonderful understanding. Now, it's very deep, and of course it's very profound, and sometimes when we hear it for the first time it's really a wonderful experience. And within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, of course, we have our wonderful Goswamis, 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipano Sadharma Samstarpako. They scrutinizingly studied all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all. Beautiful Sat Goswami Ashtakam. We don't sing those prayers so often anymore, but we should. I remember in the old days, Ramai Maharaj, after Sunday feasts in city temples, devotees, after the guests had left, devotees would sit down and we'd get the songbooks out and sing these beautiful bhajans. It's described that Srila Rupa, Srila Sanatan, and Srila Raghunath Das Goswamis, these three personalities, they are referred to as either the Sambandha Acharya or Sambandha Abhideya or Prayojana Acharyas of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the followers of Sri Chaitanya. And they also have their beloved worshipable deities. Anyone know who Sanatana Goswami's worshipable Ishtadev is? Madan Mohan, very good, thank you. Srila Rupa Goswami? Govindaji, thank you. And Raghunath Das Goswami? Gopinath, thank you so much. Yes, so these three deities, most worshipable deities in the whole of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, were worshipped by these three exalted personalities. And of course, those of us who are keen researchers of Gaudiya Vaishnava history may know that there's very delightful, charming pastimes associated with each one of all of the Goswamis' beloved deities of Radha and Krishna. And for example, there's a wonderful pastime, Srila Sanatana Goswami, living as a renunciant in Vrindavan, as he was ordered to do by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, along with his brother Rupa, sleeping under different trees every night, and just doing a little madhukari, like a bumblebee goes from one flower to another, never takes too much from each flower, just a little nectar from this flower and moves on to the next one. So similarly, the Rupa and Sanatana were just begging a little one or two here or there, the famous Braj rotis from the fortunate inhabitants of Krishna's abode, and living very simply. On one occasion, there was a merchant. His name was Krishna Das Kapoor, and he, interestingly, he was a salt merchant. And Srila Sanatana Goswami had his deity of Madan Mohan, also sometimes known as Madan Gopal. And very exalted devotees, Krishna actually speaks, the deity actually speaks to them. So whatever Sanatana Goswami was begging, he would offer to Madan Mohan, and then he would take the Lord's remnants as prasad. But all he could beg sometimes was a little atta or flour, and he would make up even just some balls and put them in the fire and bake them that way. It wasn't very extravagant, to say the least. And on one occasion, Madan Mohan ji complained to Sanatana Goswami, "Do you think you could get a little salt?" So Sanatana Goswami said, "Look, I'm a renunciant. I'm living here, just living by begging. I've also been ordered to write, so I'm trying to write in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and so many other books as Sri Chaitanya has ordered me to do." Anyway, very soon thereafter, this Krishna Das Kapoor was traveling on his barge. He was a very wealthy merchant, and he was a salt trader. So he was bringing a boatload of salt and perhaps some other merchandise along the river Jamuna. And he ran aground, actually, right near where Srila Sanatana Goswami was performing his bhajan. And he came ashore and he approached the Venerable Saint and said, "Look, what can I do?" And Sanatana Goswami said, "Well, perhaps we could both pray to Madan Mohan. He may be able to alleviate the situation." So they both prayed to Lord Madan Mohan, and instantaneously there was a thunderstorm just upriver on the river Jamuna. There was a torrential downpour, and there was a surge of water So that flowed downstream, it got underneath the merchant's boat, lifted it up off the sandbank, and Krishnadas Kapoor was able to continue his journey to, not sure either Mathura, Delhi, but anyway, he sold his salt at a handsome profit, came back and was so grateful to Srila Sanatana Goswami that he gave him an enormous donation. And that is how the famous Madan Mohan Temple in Vrindavan was built. And he also gave Sanatana Goswami a little bit of salt as well, so he could put that in the famous Braj rotis for his deity. So many delightful pastimes are there of our glorious deities of the Goswamis. Another fascinating one, which as some of you may know, and some of these deities, of course, are very ancient. It's thought, considered opinion is that when Maharaj Yudhisthira was preparing, along with his brothers, the Pandavas, to return to the spiritual world, he anointed Pariksit, of course, as we know, to be not only the emperor of Hastinapur, but the emperor of the whole world. Hastinapur was given to him. And Brajanabha was one of the great-grandsons of Krishna. And he was given by Yudhisthira Mathura and surrounding districts to be the king of. And Brajanabha very much wanted to install deities of his great-grandfather, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. But Brajanabha never actually saw Krishna. And Pariksit Maharaj also only ever saw Krishna when he was in the womb of Uttara. So Uttara was the only person who could give details of the Lord's exquisite features. So when Brajanabha was engaging different artisans to carve these deities of his great-grandfather, he carved those deities intentionally in very hard black stone, hence the name Vajra, which means imperishable, just like a diamond. And these deities were carved approximately 100 years after Lord Sri Krishna's disappearance. And it's said that according to the instructions of Uttara, Lord Govindadev, the face was identical to Lord Sri Krishna. And Gopinath, the navel and the torso of the Lord was perfect. And Madan Mohan, the lotus feet, were identical to those of Lord Sri Krishna. So in this way, Brajanabha, he installed these deities. He actually installed others as well. Haridev, Keshavaji, and he installed a deity of Lord Baladev, Nathji, and Gopal. And later Shakshi, who was later became known as Shakshi Gopal. And he also installed 4 different deities of Lord Shiva, Gopishvara Mahadev, and other deities who serve the Lord as the guardians of the 4 directions of the Holy Dharma. And he also installed 4 Devis, Ganga Devi, Vrinda Devi, Yogamaya, and Durga, in different parts of Braja. So, and he also excavated many of the original kundas, or bathing places, and lilastans of the divine couple Radha and Krishna throughout Braja Mandala. Something else that Brajanabha had to contend with when he was appointed as the king of Mathura was that there wasn't many devotees in Mathura. We may know that when Krishna became tired of the incessant attacks, 17 in number, which were coming from Jarasandha, who was a very powerful king. At one point there, Krishna and Balaram would defeat Jarasandha and his armies, drive them away, but then a year later they'd come back and attack Mathura again. Because Mathura was such an opulent city in ancient times, one of the most opulent and prosperous cities in the world. And there was also some bitter blood there, because Krishna and Balaram had killed Kamsa. And Kamsa had 2 wives, and they were both the daughters of Jarasandha. So when these 2 widows went back to their father and Jarasandha, complaining bitterly that their husband had been killed mercilessly by these 2 cowherd boys, "Father, you must avenge this insult to our family." So that was one of the reasons Jarasandha attacked. So at one point, Krishna and Balaram, Krishna made the decision, we're moving. And by the Lord's supreme mystic powers, he was able to transfer all of the residents of Mathura to the newly constructed city in Dwarka. But there were a few stubborn Mathura Brahmins who didn't want to leave. Mathura Brahmins have a long tradition, so they said, we're not leaving, we're staying here. We're going to uphold the tradition. And there were a few monkeys that stayed back as well, apparently. But largely the whole of Mathura and surrounding areas were vacant. So it's said that Rajanabha, on one occasion, Parikshit Maharaj came to check. He came from Hastinapur to Mathura. And Rajanabha confessed, well, look, it's nice being a king, but I don't have any subjects practically to rule. So there's not much point in being a king, no one to take care of. So Parikshit Maharaj suggested, well, why don't we go and see Sandilya Muni, who was actually the priest of Nanda Maharaj and other leading persons of Brajadam during that time. So Sandilya Muni, he suggested, well, why don't you invite pious Brahmins and noble Kshatriyas from Hastinapur, Indraprastha and other places to come here and reside, and you can give them land and they can prosper here. And so that's exactly what they did. They repopulated Braja and Mathura, and they also established different regional capitals, if you like, in different provinces, in different parts, such as, I think Govardhan may have been their ancient town, but other parts of Brajadam, they established townships and villages, and in this way Brajadam was repopulated. So these wonderful deities are there installed. They're very ancient, of course, and at different times there were attacks. What to speak about Jarasandha in the last 4,500 years before Mahaprabhu and the 6 Goswamis' pastimes, of course, and even after that there were numerous attacks on Mathura throughout northern India from invading conquerors. So in many cases the deities, the original deities, had to be hidden for some time. Some were even hidden in Radhakund, submerged in the water, and then when it was safe they were transferred by bullock carts to Rajasthan and reinstalled in different parts of Rajasthan, where the kings were Vaishnavas and very, very powerful. So such a rich tradition, so many wonderful historical accounts which we can relish of our beloved Goswamis and their deities. So we were thinking also, and of course Prabhupada does mention here. We have Vaidhi Bhakti, following a regulated life, following rules and regulations, patiently throughout our lives. Tatte nukampam sushamikshamana bunjana eva takripam vipakam. And the last half of the final line is Mukti Pade Sadayava. This beautiful verse, I think from the 10th canto, describes how a devotee goes on patiently enduring whatever reverses come to one during the course of everyone's lifetime, worshipping Krishna within the core of his or her heart, knowing that the final destination is certainly there. Just like a child knows at the end of their lifetime they will certainly inherit the wealth and the property of their parents. And also knowing that Krishna is very merciful in that he is minimizing any reactions we would otherwise experience in the course of our lifetimes when we do actually surrender to him. He's just giving us a little token reminder from time to time how this material world is not actually a real permanent happy place. That gives us impetus actually for going back to home, back to Godhead. If it was so wonderful, there would not be that impetus to do anything about it, to practice spiritual life. So we practice our Vaidhi Bhakti, and another beautiful verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Shushusho Shraddhanasya Vasudeva Kata Ruchi, that it is by the mercy of Krishna's devotees that we get to hear something about him. And if we develop that Vasudeva Kata Ruchi, that taste for hearing about topics, the name, fame, form, pastimes, entourage of Lord Sri Krishna, it's a very difficult thing to get, and it's very hard to hold on to. You can lose it very easily. If you get it, hang on to it. Don't lose it. Just like if you have some treasure, if you have some wealth, anyone who travels a lot, we know, not that we're traveling very much at the moment, but when you do travel, you have to really guard your possessions, because you can easily, if you're casual, then you can end up being a casualty of theft, even something as easy as leaving your passport unattended, and then your life can become very problematic very quickly, what to speak of some wealth you may be carrying. So it's the most wonderful treasure to hold on to, Vasudeva Kata Ruchi. And with a little bit of shraddha, a little bit of faith, even we don't know how medicine is acting on our bodies. We don't know what's in the medicine, but if we're ill and we consult a bona fide medical practitioner, he gives us this medicine, says take this 3 times a day, this is the dosage. Then with a little bit of faith we take, and then we find miraculous curative benefits. So long ago there was a pious king in the northern parts of India, and he was a very dutiful king. He used to travel regularly throughout his kingdom, ensuring that all of the citizens were happy and prosperous. On one such excursion, he was staying in one town for a few days, and he observed one yogi would come every evening right on dusk and enter the freezing cold water of the river and meditate all night up to his neck. And then at dawn the next morning he would leave the river and go back into the forest. And he'd done this for many years. And the local people were very fond of this yogi, and they used to ask him, why do you do this? And he says, I'm not doing it for myself, but I'm actually doing it for all of your benefit, for all of your happiness and prosperity. So he's very selfless. And of course, yogis have such mystic powers that they can easily meditate and not feel any inconvenience. Prapti Siddhi, Laghima Siddhi, Anima Siddhi, the different mystic powers are there which yogis can utilize. So the king was very grateful. He met the yogi, thanked him. It was a very cordial exchange. Next time the yogi came down for his evening meditation, the king was waiting. So the king said, I'm very grateful. I understand you're doing this for the benefit of my citizens here, so I'm very grateful. And indeed it was a prosperous town. There was never a shortage. The crops grew abundantly. The cows were happy. The people were happy. So the king said, I want to give you some gold coins. So the yogi said, actually, Your Majesty, I have no need of gold. I'm a yogi. The forest provides all my necessities, fruits and roots. I have some cowherd friends. They give me milk whenever I need. So actually, but the king was insistent. He said, no, you please take these gold coins for some emergency. You spend them as you like. So reluctantly, the yogi took the gold coins. Now the king had one envious minister who had no faith in yoga siddhis, was very greedy. So he complained to the king that actually the minister stayed up that night and observed that on one nearby temple there was a lamp burning all night, as was the custom in olden days to illuminate buildings. So this envious minister surmised erroneously that the yogi was somehow or other drawing some heat from that distant lantern, and in that way he was remaining warm enough to stay in the water of the river all night. So he presented this hypothesis to the king. The king was skeptical, but anyway, at the next meeting, the king reluctantly put forward this idea. So the yogi quickly said, this is not the case, and I will show you how, Your Majesty. What would you like for breakfast tomorrow morning? So the king said, well, my habit is normally to take porridge and khichdi, a little bit like New Govardhana, for breakfast. So what time do you like to take? 9 a.m. So the yogi said, Your Majesty, you please come with your retinue and I will gladly cook you breakfast tomorrow morning. So they came the following morning right on time, and the yogi had engaged some of the local people, and they had set up fires, and there were 2 pots. The yogi was furiously stirring the pots, and there was quite a hubbub going on. But there was a problem. In the sense that the yogi had purposefully installed the pots, had hung them from hooks on steel tripods, which were very high up above the fire. So obviously nothing was happening. He was stirring. But the preparations weren't being cooked because they were so far removed off the floor, up from the fire. So immediately the king understood, and the foolish minister, he also understood that there was no possibility of the yogi deriving any warmth from this distant lantern. So Prabhupada told this story once to emphasize, if we really want to perfect our sadhana bhakti, then we have to stay close to the fire of Krishna consciousness. And of course that's been a little challenging for many of us living outside. We offer millions of dandavat obeisances to the fortunate residents of New Govardhana who have had a wonderful, since March, lockdown. Life has more or less gone on, and in fact there has been some benefits. But for many of us living outside, unable to come to the temple for months, and then just having restricted opportunities, But still, for many devotees who have been in identical situations all over the world, devotees are very resourceful and very resilient and adaptable. And when one opportunity, for example, to preach broadly to the public, unhindered, is taken away, then devotees utilize that time for more intense personal sadhana, reading and chanting. And just as from time to time we chat with our revered senior god brother, His Holiness Indradumna Swami, who has also been in that situation in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And the last time we spoke, Maharaj said, well, actually it's been a blessing for me because it's forced me to study very deeply, to do research, because as we know, Maharaj normally, like many of our leaders, they're on the road all year, a great personal inconvenience, travelling, organising festivals, managing temples, and it's very tiring and exhausting, and they're giving so much of themselves, extending so much of themselves. So Maharaj was actually appreciating that I've been forced to do this, so I'm taking advantage. So, of course, we do have to somehow or other remain in the fire of Krishna consciousness, whether that's on our own or having one or two or three very dear devotee friends who we can share either in person or by the wonders of modern technologies. Stay in touch with there. So I might stop here and just see if anyone Maharaj has a comment or a question. Ajita Prabhu, I see a hand going up. There is a microphone here. Ajita?
I was just going to ask you, Rajanava, the grandson.
Great grandson.
He installed a lot of temples and deities in the area of Raja. But he also installed a lot of Shiva temples around there. Do you know why?
To protect the holy Dham. That's my understanding. And for example, and Krishna has other energies as well. With some, for example, he also installed these different devis, which we're very fond of course, such as Vrinda Devi, the presiding goddess of Sri Vrindavan Dham, and Yogamaya Purnamasi. And there is Praudamaya is described as a thin film over the entire Braj Mandala, which means that very materialistic persons, when they come to Vrindavan, they can't actually enter into, they can't commit offences in the holy Dham. They see things externally, and quite often they don't stay very long as a result. For example, the monkeys will harass them, the dogs will harass them, even some of the Brijbasis will harass them, mosquitoes are there, and so on. So similarly, Lord Shiva, he very much, as we know, wanted to also enter into some of Krishna's intimate pastimes, such as the Adi-lila. But he, obviously being in a male body, that was not going to be possible. So, he is stationed there, and his service, because we know Lord Shiva is the topmost Vaishnava, Vaishnavanam Jata Sambhu, so he is the topmost servant of Krishna. So he also has his service there in the Holy Dham to protect the Holy Dham. Anyone else?
You don't think that, as you said before, I was trying to populate Mathura in the Braja area. You don't think that he was, sometimes when you go open football stadiums so that you can get population. don't think that he was trying to populate. A lot of people in those days were Shivaites, so he thought, might as well make Shivite population there, fill up the houses.
Possibly. Actually it's interesting because Srila Sanatana Goswami has a very special relationship with the Lord Shiva. And interesting, yesterday, I didn't know this until I read it. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but actually Mahaprabhu wrote not just Shikshastakam prayers, but he actually wrote a Shivastakam. Mahaprabhu. Yeah, 8 prayers glorifying Lord Shiva. So, and I'm just trying to remember where that is. It's in one of our Gaudiya literatures. So there's an intimate connection there, even in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Yes, very much so. Many wonderful pastimes. Yeah, briefly, for example, with Sanatana Goswami, there was one Shivite living in Varanasi who was very poor and had a daughter of marriageable age, and his wife was really on his case. You've got to get our daughter married, threatening suicide, the whole thing. So this poor man didn't know what to do. He didn't have any money for a dowry to get his daughter married. He had a dream. Lord Shiva appeared to him in the dream and said, go to Govardhan, meet Sanatana Goswami, and he'll give you abundant wealth. So that's the origin of the touchstone. So that Shivite came all the way, made inquiries. That's Sanatana Goswami over there, and of course we know he was keeping the touchstone in the refuse out the back. And wonderful story. According to some, he got the touchstone, became fabulously wealthy, but then said to Sanatana Goswami, you must have something more precious. Sanatana Goswami said, yes, I do. Do you want that? And the man said, yes. So, the deal was you have to throw this touchstone in the river Jamuna. So the man did that, came back, and Sanatana Goswami initiated him into the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And daughter was married, no problem. Man may have actually stayed in Braja, but some other arrangement was made. So many wonderful pastimes. Maharaj, a comment about Lord Shiva and Braj from you? That's all right, I don't want to put you... Is that all right, Ajita Prabhu? Is that all right? Okay. All right, Krishna Kirtan.
Just a quick, can you verify, because you mentioned the 3 principal deities, I think you said Govinda had the face of Krishna and under the lotus feet, and Gopinath the torso, right?
Very good, yes, perfect.
And my understanding is, I've heard many times over the years, that the self-manifested deity of Gopalpata Goswami, Radharama, he has those 3 features.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. I've heard that also.
So
yes.
we assume that's the perfect form of the Lord.
Yeah, I've heard that. Thank you.
Correct.
We don't
have the source.
All right, ladies. Hare Krishna. Jai Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai.